If you are anything like me, then you probably have a very hard time staying consistent when it comes to budget tracking. However, don't let this discourage you. That's completely fine, because in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how you can stay consistent with budget tracking. You see, the key that I discovered after 3 years is simplicity. You need to keep your budget tracking extremely simple. Over the years, I have tried many different apps like Notion, EveryDollar, Money Manager, and hundreds of other Excel templates. But none of these catered directly to my needs, and I had a very hard time staying consistent because I constantly needed to log into these apps or learn different terms or learn different formulas. So what I did after 3 years is finally build a super simple budget tracking template. And I'm going to show you in this video how. So stay until the end of this video to learn how to fully customize a budget tracking template of your own, or simply download the template with the link in the description below. So let's dive right in. First and foremost, I do want to explain what the sheet looks like and how you can customize it for your own needs, although it's pretty self-explanatory. So what we have here is the overview of our budget tracking template. Here we have all of the months of the year. However, you don't have to start from January from scratch. You can start simply from July. So here we have all of the templates, the empty templates. And now that we're in the month of July, we basically have this. So we have two types of templates. We have the income template and we have the expenses. We don't key in anything in the income or expenses table. What we do instead is we key in everything here. So if we have an allowance coming in of, let's say, 100 francs, and if we select allowance from the drop-down menu, what we can see is that it added to the allowance, and it also showed on the pie chart here. What I like to do with my budgeting is basically visualize where my income comes from and where my money actually goes, hence the pie charts. I like to visualize that majority of my income either comes from my salary or from my side income, and it's a good way to keep track of what's really benefiting your pockets, you know. And for the expenses, here I like to visualize how much of my money goes into, you know, going out like parties or clothes and shoes. I like to see how much of my money goes where the most, and in this case it would be the rent. And up here we have a small table for savings, and what I do with savings is basically just minus whatever income I have left minus the expenses, which is basically going all the way to my savings, either to a different bank account or to a savings account. And here, if we have a saving of 600 francs, then it will go to a savings account. And we have a little sticker here that says good job depending on your goal. So if I have reached a goal of obtaining more than 500 Swiss francs that month, it will say good job. However, if let's say we don't have that much side income, it says, if we don't have so much savings, it says, oh man. So yeah, just something to encourage me a little bit to save more. So now I am going to show you how to make this template from scratch. Before we create the overview, we will start with the monthly sheet. So we'll call this, so we'll call this July. And then we'll have two tables, which is basically the income table and the expenses table. Now I really like to do my formatting on the go because it really helps me visualize and it keeps me motivated to keep doing my Excel sheet. So you can either do this in the beginning with me right now, or you can also do this designing at the end. So now in our income table, we will key in the usual monthly income that we have. For example, our salary if we're a student and we have a part-time job, or our allowance from parents, or perhaps we have a side income like babysitting, pet sitting, or freelancing, anything. And if you have something that you cannot name, you can just input others and you can go with it. However, I will delete this. I'd also like to see my total income of the month, so I will key that in here. And for our expenses, we will basically write down the basics first, such as rent, transportation, groceries. Now, when it comes to phone plans or Netflix, or if you have any other subscription channels, you can write down as subscriptions. Then we have insurance. I also like to see how much of my money goes into eating out or partying, so I will just write this as going out. And also how much of my money goes into shopping, so I will label this clothes or shoes. If you have other expenses, you can also of course write others, but I will not write them down because I like to see exactly where my expenses go. And then here we can write the total. So if we control hold, we can select multiple cells in order to format them. It's just a quicker way of doing things. Alright, and now we can have a table below the income, which is basically the description and the category of our income. Now you can Control C and Control V to the expenses because it's the exact same table. And now here we can create a category which is basically from our salary, allowance, and side income. And the way you do this is you right click, you find drop down, and you in this right hand side you will see criteria. And instead of criteria you should select instead of drop down, you should select drop down from a range. And here in this range, you click salary, allowance, and side income. So it should appear like this. And then you click done. And here, if you drop down, in your drop down menu, you should see salary, allowance, side income. Now, whatever amount you key in here, and even if you say that it's your salary, it will not show up here because we haven't formatted this cell yet. So let's do that right now. So you can double click here, equals sum if. And now you select the range, which is basically this, where we have our category. And then you select the name that you wanted to search. So in our case, it's the salary for this column. And then the amount that you wanted to find is basically in this range. And here we have our 100 shown. Now, if this doesn't work for you, you might have a few spelling mistakes. Be careful with that because even if you have like a space here, it most of the time will not work. So you have to be really careful with spelling errors or grammar errors. Like even this dash, you have to be sure to include it. So now what we can do is we can add dollar signs so that this maintains the same when we drag it down. So we add dollar signs in front of these cell numbers. And then we click enter. And now what we can do is we can drag and drop. And here, instead of salary, we can change it to allowance. And the one at the bottom, we can change to side income. And now let's test out if it works. Let's say we got, oh, don't forget to drop down this categories list. And if you see that it all shows salary, don't be afraid. You just select the cells and click delete on your keyboard. And now if you, let's say you wrote 200 here and you want to label it as allowance, you click here. And let's see, it doesn't work. So why does it not work? We'll have to figure that out. Is it the same spelling as this? No, it's not because allowance has a space after it. So we have to delete the space. And here it will show us a little error, invalid, because it's not within the input range. So what we can do in this case is, let's try to click allowance again. And there we go, it corrected itself. So we can just click allowance, or we can redo the criteria table. And now let's test the side income. Let's say I earned another 100 from a side income. And again, it will not show. Why does it not show? Let's test it out. That's because I have another space after side income. So we delete that space, we see the red ribbon, we see that it's invalid, we re-click it. Well, there we go. Side income, 100. Problem solved. Yay! And now in total, we can write here sum. Now we can select all of this. There we go. And now we have our total income. Now here, I really like to write the descriptions to see where my money is really coming from. And here we have the date. And now it's the exact same thing for expenses. We create a drop-down menu from a range, and this will be our new range. Here we have rent, transportation, groceries, and you can of course feel free to choose your colors, make it custom. It's always more fun when it's catered directly to what you want, to the style that you desire. So now let's say if my rent was 500 for the month, if we click on rent, it won't show because this cell is not yet formulated, and it's basically the exact same as this, but it goes to the expense table. So here it would be sum if, and here we select this category. Let's say it's until here, and we write rent, and then we select the amount that it should search, which is basically from here. And now we have rent, 500. So it shows. And now I will just speed this up because it's the exact same process as the income table. Right now I'm adding the dollar signs so that it's the same criteria when I drag and drop it. Because if you don't drag and drop it, what it will do is instead of taking from this top cell, it will take the next bottom cell. So you don't want that, you want it to select from the top, because here it might not always be rent, you might be spending on subscription first or something else, and here we need to write down that it's subscription. Alright, now that we have all of our category cells formulated, what we can do is we can drag and drop this category table, and again we can just click on the cells and we delete it. And now let's say we have spent 50 francs on our transportation. So let's scroll a bit up and select transportation, so it should appear right here directly. Transported. Then let's say we went out partying with a couple of our friends and we spent 15 francs. So this would be labeled as going out. As you can see, it doesn't work, so we'll have to double check what we went wrong. And again, it's the space, it's invalid. So we reselect it now, and there we go. Now it shows. Now, the next thing I like to do is I really like to visualize my income and expenses. It just makes it easier for me to process. Now what we can do is we can select this in our income table, and we can select insert. Then we find a chart. There we go. And here we already have a pie chart. If you don't see a pie chart the moment you open it, then you can click here on the chart type and you can select pie. And now we will see where our income comes from, whether it's side income, salary allowance. Right now it's a nice divide. So maybe what we can do instead is we can write arbitrary numbers, and there we go. Now it's a little more realistic, there we go. Okay, and we can do the same exact thing for our expenses. So we select this, insert, then we click chart. And here we can see where most of our expenses go. So in my case right now, most of my income goes to rent. As we can see, 88% of my income goes to rent. Now, what I also like to do is I like to have a savings table, a little cell of savings, which is basically my income minus my expenses. And the way you can do that is basically, so total income minus total expenses. What I forgot to do here is format this cell. So what we're going to do is we're going to sum it all up. There we go. And now we have a nice total, and we have clearly more expenses than our income, but this is just an example. So the savings will actually show negative 350. But if you have, of course, more income, then it will show how much savings you have here. So this is a nice little way of visualizing it. Of course, you can also add different labels to this pie chart by selecting the legend, by adding titles. Here you can have the axis titles as well, but for now, to keep this video short, I am just going to show you next how to do the overview. So for the other months, what you can do is, actually, let's design the title first. Now, another thing with Excel is that I don't really like to view all of the cells because it's just too much to look at. So what I like to do is I like to go here and remove the grid lines. So now it's a much cleaner design and it's just more visually pleasant. So here we can rename our sheet to July, and then we can duplicate it for the other months. And yeah, what months after July? It's August, right? And then you can, of course, start the whole template from scratch. You can have it for all the other months, and yeah. And now let's design the overview. So a good way to design the overview would be to start with the months. I'm going to speed it up a little because it's very repetitive. Now here we have our income, our total expenses, and our savings. And here we can have our total savings because I like to see how much I have saved at the end of the year. Now we select this, we merge it and write the 20 font, and then here yes. Now, in order to see how much our total income and total expenses, what we have to do is we have to go to that particular month's sheet. So for example, let me just quickly move it here. So we go to the July sheet and we see the total income is here. So it would be in the cell C9. So what we do here in the month of July is write equals July, and then we write exclamation mark C9, and here it will show our total income. The same thing for our expenses, which is basically H13. So we do equals July exclamation point H13. There we go, there we have it. And for our savings, exact same thing. We go here, we can either say it's P2, or we can apply the same math and say this minus this, which is a little bit easier. And this basically is applied to all the months. And here for the total savings, what we do is equals sum and sum of all year savings. And at the end, your overview should basically look something like this. I didn't go through all of the months because it's basically the same thing repeated for the other months. Another thing that you can do is, of course, select your own currency, which I didn't talk about before. So the way you do this is you basically go to Format, then you click Number, and here you can add a custom currency. Usually the most used currencies are already listed in the formatting. So here I'm using Swiss francs, so all of it will be in Swiss francs. If you would like to download the template and edit it to your own needs, then simply click the link in the description below where you will find this file. This file will say that it is view only. However, if you go to the button File and you click Make a Copy, you should be able to make a copy of your own budget tracker where you can edit it as you wish, and then it won't affect the main file. So if there is any mistakes, or if you ever want to go back to the original file, you could still do that with the link in my description. So now that you know how to make a super simple budgeting template on Google Sheets, be sure to check out what life is really like as an international student in Switzerland. I hope I'll see you in that video.